Rid of this program one. We've decided that that is the most inefficient way and not the way we want to work, and I want to take a look at this program 2. In fact, I'm going to get rid of all the code apart from the array itself, and I've just said that each one of these is called an element. Now this is important for the exam. Let me just put that in there, so just in case you're listening to with headphones, important for exam. Because as we've seen here, Pythons, we are using Python lists. That actual item is a list and not arrays, and this is where they differ. And this is what you need to be aware of for the exam only. So let's go back and I'll explain what I mean. So all elements in arrays must be of the same data type. So here in this array, which I called num array, all of them were integers. I couldn't do this. I couldn't suddenly have 1 at 3.5. If I did that, well, let's call this one a real or a float array, because now each one of these is a floating point number. So really that's 1.0, that is 4.0, and so on. They have to have a decimal point in. And let's shorten it as well, because we don't want to be spending hours changing all of these things. They all have to be the same type. So that is something called a real array, and I'm responsible for creating the name. You could have called that elephant if you want, it really doesn't matter. But it's best if you're using an array like this to actually use the word array in your variable name. So if I do an int array, looks like this: 1, 2, 3. They're all the same data type. If I used a string array, then the array consists of strings. The cat, oops, that's not a string. Sat. There we go, that will do. All of these are strings. Notice that each element is also separated with a comma. Important. You can't just write the cat sat. Each one of these words has to be separated by a comma. Now we can do a Boolean array, and that would be something like true, false, true. They all have to be of the same data type. Now, if you go researching online or looking for help files on Python, and you know you're looking for arrays, and that Python uses lists, the difference between a list and an array is that a list can have different data types. So my list can be equal to 1 true sat 3.5. So I've got 4 different data types in my list. That is not an array. Okay, it's a list. These will not appear in your exam. They are far too complicated. and difficult to play with because they contain different data types. So the only things that will appear in your exam are arrays, and the important part about arrays is that they all have the same data type. Okay, I'm going to keep this here just for a second because the same thing happens in the next part with lists as does arrays. If I wanted to look at the numbers that are individual, if I wanted to get hold of them, the 1.0, the 4.0, I use something called an index. Very important to understand. And the index always starts at 0. And this is an area they will test. Because it leads to something called a one-off error. And I'm going to explain that sort of now. So if I run my program, nothing's going to happen apart from the shell's going to pop up. There we go. And I'm going to drag the shell down because actually this is sort of running in memory and it still knows what my values are. So if I type real array here, it will print out the real the array that I set up. And the same goes for int array. It's kept that in the computer memory until I write or run another program. Now, if I want to access this value here, the first value, I've actually got to use the index 0. They start at 0 and go up by 1. So that is 0, 1, 2. So let me do that. So if I want to access that data, I can say real array, and I've got to use square brackets, and inside here put my index. So if I say real array 0, that will give me 1.0. If I say real array at position 1, the second element, so first element, second element, but 0 and 1, which is why we get a one-off error. We kind of one out. So if I ask for the real array at position 1, I get the 4.0. If I do the same for the third, oops, that's not a square bracket, the third, or position 0, 1, 2, I get 3.5. Now, importantly, I cannot go beyond. So that's 0, 1, 2. If I try to get to 3, which is your one-off error, I end up with an error. Real array 3. So if you think there's 3 items in and I want to go and get the third one, you'll end up with an error. And it will say that the list index is out of range. Because it's a list, we're using an index, and it's beyond the range of items that we've got. And we can get all the rest of the values as well. So let's try this string array. So string array at position 2 gives me sat. The bool array at position 1 gives me false, 0, 1. And as I said, arrays all need to be the same data type, but this still works with lists. So I can actually use my list and sort of get this sat here. That's 0, 1, 2. So my list at position 2 gives me the word sat. And again, any of those, if I go beyond the end, so this one is 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I ask for the fourth element in this one, I will get an index out of range. So these are called indexes. They have to be in square brackets. They follow the name of the variable and tell you what is at that position. This is going to be incredibly useful to us later on in the course. We are going to be doing some real algorithms such as searching for items or sorting items into order. We'll be doing it on paper, so we'll be doing the algorithm. However, I will show you the computational way, that is writing the program, to solve some of those problems. We can't solve all of them because the algorithms are a little bit easier than the programming, but we'll be doing some searching and we'll be doing some sorting. And there are 2 searches and 3 sorts that you need to know for the exam. You will be asked questions on them. So it will be well worth your time understanding what is going on with these. So what have we done in this this lesson? We've seen that we can have arrays, but they must all be of the same type. It's not true in Python, but it is true in virtually every other language. Python uses a data type called list, which is a bit different, but it kind of contains an array, which is why we're using it. There is no such data type as an array in Python, but your exam will be based around arrays. So arrays all have the same data type. We can work out the length. We can work out where everything is by getting an index, 0, 1, 2. It starts at 0, and really it goes for the number of elements in the list. So 3 elements, take away 1 gives me 2. So that's the biggest index. So 3 elements, take away 1 gives me 2. What that means is that I've got 0, 1 and 2 for the indexes. Same goes for here. I've got 3 elements in my list. So 3, if I take away 1, then I've got the indexes 0, 1 and 2. So 2 is my largest index in both of them. Here I've got, let's take this out of the way. Here I've got 4 items in my list, 4 elements. Take away 1 is my one-off error. Take 1 off. That gives me a total of 3. So I have got the indexes 0, 1, 2, and the largest is 3. That number. One way of working it out. So that's taking a look at arrays in a little bit more detail, but we need to play around with them and have a bit of fun with them. So we'll take a look at that in the next set of lessons.